Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 79, we think, of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we're coming to you once again from the worldwide headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week as we highlight The Calling. We have Chasty King and April Payne with us today. Chasty is the president and April is the vice president, of the organization. Chasty and April, it's great to have you on and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
All right, April, you're up since you're closest.
Oh.
If you don't mind, if you just tell us a little bit about yourself, anything you'd like to share before we get into talking about The Calling.
Well, I am a mom of 4 boys.
Ooh.
We have a lot of excitement at our house. Someone's always doing something. We have 6 dogs now, 6 cats, and 40 chickens, and 3 ducks, and whatever else decides to wander up. And so we
got a lot going on, huh?
We have a lot, yeah, and we homeschool, and so we're trying to stay busy, doing all sorts of stuff. And I recently just started back grad school, so to get working towards getting a licensure in clinical mental health counseling.
Okay. So
hopefully that will help. We'll be able to pour into the people that we minister to more. And
understood.
Yeah, so busy, very, very busy.
Yeah, just the 4 boys before the zoo that you described. Just the 4 boys can be. What you mind me asking? What are their ages?
The oldest is 20, and then 14, 11, and 10.
Yeah, you might have a full schedule there.
Yeah,
with that.
It's fun though. I wouldn't trade it for anything. They're great boys.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Chasty, how about you? What would you like to share?
No kids for me, but I do have 4 dogs.
Okay.
And they act like kids, I swear. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I'm a drug and alcohol counselor.
Okay.
So I actually work for Phoenix Counseling. And I'm also a person in recovery from addiction. So I have a little over 6 years clean. And so obviously I use my lived experiences. That's what I go around speaking. I speak and share my testimony, and the book that I published is a memoir, so it's about.
Okay. We one thing we talk about before we finish is books, the recommendation, because we'll make sure we get that in the show notes, and we can talk about that before we're finished. Are you both from Gastonia or
yes.
Originally, or?
Originally, yes. I'm from Bessemer City. That was my hometown. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So. This is I was looking forward to this when I saw it on our calendar, because this is, until I did some research yesterday, I didn't know a whole lot about The Calling. So maybe stick with you, Chasty. Just kind of tell us what is The Calling, what's the mission, and then most of these questions are going to be for both of you, so you can talk over each other or however you want to handle that. But just kind of let our listeners know what you guys are, or the work you guys are doing, and what The Calling actually is.
Well, we are actually an outreach ministry, and we are based in Gaston County, but we do serve surrounding areas. So we have done work in Lincoln County and Cleveland County as well. And basically our mission is very simple. It's to go after the one. And what we mean by that is that there's always one person that usually God sends to us or sends us to them. And we just focus on, helping change one life at a time, basically. When we go after the one, the way that we look at it is, one person can make a difference. And if we can make a difference in just one person's life,
sure,
then, that's worth it. And we mainly focus on helping people who are experiencing addiction, homelessness, or incarceration. So we do a lot of prison and jail ministry as well. And that's basically the gist of it. We just try to help people recover and heal from their trauma, and that looks different at different times.
So for the sake of, I've read about it on the website and how it got started. Do you mind sharing kind of the backstory on how you went from not doing the calling, and now here this is, and these great shirts you have on.
Yes.
Just kind of give our listeners maybe kind of that background, because I thought it was an interesting story.
Yes. Well, it all started with prayer cloths. I used to work for the Olive Branch Ministry.
Okay.
And I managed the overdose response team and needle exchange in Gaston County. And that job allowed me to be exposed to the community of people who were experiencing addiction and homelessness. And I was introduced to tent sites, like tent cities.
Yeah.
And I would have my friend April here. She and her mom have a prayer cloth ministry. So they would make me batches at a time. And I would hand out these prayer cloths as led by the Holy Spirit, along with little scrolls rolled up with my testimony. And one weekend, I went to a tent site, and it was like legit. They had, a shower out there, a toilet. It was very clean, and it was just very nice. Like if I was gonna, go live on the land for a little bit, that would be where I go. And whenever I went there, I gave them these prayer cloths, and I asked permission. I said, can I just take a picture, and I want to send this to the woman who made the prayer cloths, because she don't all the time see.
Right.
And
you didn't get to see the end result.
Exactly. So I sent her a picture, and I guess it just wrecked her. She was overwhelmed by it, and she wanted to come out with me. And from there, we started going out like every Saturday, and we just never stopped. And then one thing led to another, and people wanted to start donating money. And they're like, who do we make the check out to? What's the organization's name? And I'm like, well, we're not really like an organization. We're just,
Gotcha.
We're just fulfilling our calling. And so that's where the name came in, the calling. And
Okay.
God led us to do a 501c3, and filed the paperwork, and here we are.
All right, that's great. That's just a good story, And my experience with my involvement in the community, they're just gonna get that over. So it's that noise is gonna drive me insane. Again, this high-end like silent sound studio we have here. But my experience is that it takes somebody with a vision, somebody doing something intentionally in the community, and who knows where that's going to lead. So I like to hear those backstories. So, April, how would you describe your role and your kind of experience with the organization, and anything you'd like to add on to what Chasty shared?
Like she said, it really wasn't planned, and even the prayer cloth ministry was something that God just kind of started. It was I was in a very, very dark season of spiritually of my life, and I was actually visiting a close friend who was in a hospice house, Testa hospice house in Kings Mountain, and as I was leaving that evening, I saw a basket on the counter, and it had prayer cloths in it, and then just had little gifts from people for the family. And I just thought it was such a touching thing that people would just think about people and families when they were, they're getting ready to lose their family members. And so it was that night I went to bed, and of course I was just at my lowest of low spiritually. And then the next morning I got up, and it was in my devotion time, and the Lord was like, I want you to start making prayer cloths. And at that time, I had no concept of, I knew what a prayer cloth was from Acts 19:11, but I'm like, how do you make them? And so then it was just like one step of being obedient to the next one. And so then he just instructed me to, me and my mom, we just put them together, and then I would just anoint them and pray over them, and God would just give me word to pray and declare over them. I had no idea where they were going, who they would go to. I was just being obedient to what the Lord had asked me to do in that season, because honestly, where I was spiritually, my faith was just wrecked. And so I had started to question everything that I had believed about God and in his word. Was it really real because of this traumatic thing that had happened in my life? And so, of course, Chastity found out about it, and that's how I started giving them to her. And then that day, I think just one afternoon, I just checked my phone, and there was a picture, and she said, this is where your prayer cloths are going. And I was just like, what? And in the vicinity of that was a mom who was actually 6 months pregnant. And that is probably really what just really did it for me. Being a mom, imagine a woman being pregnant, 6 months pregnant, homeless, living out in the woods. You know, what's going to happen to this baby if she goes into labor, and then she's addicted to meth, and this poor baby's going to have to, you just, as a mom, you're just like, whoa. And I asked her where this place was, and it was just off Cox Road. And I'm like, there's no way. I drive by there every day. There's no way. And I just was like, I got to see this for myself. And, part of me was like, this can't be real. Not in our own, you see those kind of things in Charlotte and on the news and big cities, but it's like this is, and, you see homeless people, but to actually think that people live like this. And so then we went out, and I think it was the second time we ran into a gentleman, and he started describing his encounter that he had where he had lost his father. And so, but he said, I know God has always been with me. And I said, well, explain to me, how do you, what is your experience with the Lord? And so he began to tell me the story of how he was on his way to the hospital the night before, very close to when his dad was going to pass, but he didn't make it because of his addiction. He had ended up getting high, and he had disappointed his family. His father passed away, and he never got to tell him bye or, any of that. And he was just really wrecked, and he was walking back on the sidewalk, and he looked down, and he saw a cross on the sidewalk. And he reached up and picked it up, and then he knew in that instant God was telling him, I've got you no matter what. I'm in your life, and I'm going to take care of you. And then he said he walked a couple steps more, and then there was another cross, and he picked it up again. Well, about this time, he reaches back and pulls his wallet out, and he hands me the cross. And I lost it, because it was a cross that I had put on my prayer cloth. And so, in that, I'm going to try not to cry, but in that instant, I realized that God can intertwine some of the most minute details and weave our own brokenness and just our obedience to do what he asks us to do, and he can just weave it all together, and he can touch lives that you would never even realize. And that was just one encounter where I knew, and that was part of my healing and my restoration of coming back and understanding and having a part of a resolution of things and that had happened in my life. And then it was just that. We just kept going out, and it was just every single time we went out, the Lord, we could tell you the person that God sent to us that day. We knew, okay, this is why we were here. This is this person that we were supposed to meet. And it just kind of, it kept going from there. And, there were many other things that and for me, I've never been addicted to drugs. So I've always been her friend, and our connection, God connected us. But it was one of those things that I just couldn't I had family and my own father. I've lost my own father to suicide and addiction, and I have other family members. So it was very close to me, but I never really struggled with that. And so my thing was, well, how can I relate to these people? I can't. And, God, he has done a miraculous work to show that, even Jesus could relate to people, and he never sinned. He was sinless, but he was still able to have compassion and sympathy and be able to relate and minister to them and in their needs. And it's the same thing. So, and this is just where we just keep doing the very next thing that God asked us to do.
Maybe we should stop the podcast right there after that. That's quite a testimony, quite a story, and I'm appreciate. I especially I'm afraid that to your first couple things you said, I'm afraid God has probably spoken to me a few times, and I didn't want to listen to him. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like what I want to do, God. So I'm going to go.
Or we want a 5-point explanation as to why before we do it. And he's like,
that's what I would want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me the summary layout of what's going to happen next.
Right. Yeah, give me the whole blueprint.
That's right.
All of everything. Yeah.
So that's so you shared a lot of stuff there. That's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to ask the question, and you kind of talked about. You talked about some of the initiatives already, but can you maybe talk about more specifics? Some of the things you're doing, maybe the weekend, the life at the calling, or what you're doing. Just kind of get our listeners, you kind of shared some big picture stuff, maybe some of the more specifics that you guys are doing on a week to week or month to month basis, some of the initiatives that are happening.
Yeah. So, like I said, we originally started going out directly to the tent sites, directly to the hotels, exactly to where people were. And that we did that for a long time, and it was like clockwork. Every single Saturday, we would come out. We would bring anything that they might need. We'd bring backpacks or food or just whatever it was. And most of the time, we would ask them, hey, what is it that you might need? And then a lot of times, though, we would just bring food, and we would go out there and hang out and just like sit by the tent with them and just eat a sandwich and just talk with them, not necessarily try to like witness Jesus to them and, hey, you need to get saved or not try to fix them, but just be their friend and develop that relationship. And then over time, it kind of developed and evolved. I purchased a house in 2020, I think a couple years ago. And I knew when I purchased this house, it was about 4 or 5 bedrooms. And I knew the Lord had told me that it was going to be a place of refuge. And so what ended up happening is that through the ministry, we bring people into the house. It's a little bit different because I live there, right? But every decision of somebody coming to stay there is prayerfully considered. We do have the oversight of our pastor, and of course we have our board, me and April and another lady named Renee. So every person that comes in, we always pray and make a decision, with the Lord about it. But we started bringing people into the home because it's one thing, with addiction, you need a stable environment. There's a lot of different factors that go into helping somebody recover, and they need a safe place where they can recover. And so we started just bringing people in. We've had men and women in the house. We've had, people close to 60-year-old and people in their 30s. So it just ranges. And so now that's our main focus, is helping the individuals that we do bring into the home and focusing on that discipleship, focusing on that one-on-one.
Okay. April, what about you? Anything you would add to that or anything that you've seen? I mean, the next question I like is similar, is like, can you talk about, and you've already done it, but maybe without using any names, think of a specific example or anecdotal story of a success you've seen and the impact you guys have made on somebody specific. I mean, you already shared the great story, right?
Well, we always talk about Joe, which Joe actually works for this company.
Okay.
And so Joe, how we came encountered with Joe is he was actually the very first one that I met when I went out with her. And I remember the very first, we actually met. We were meeting him at the Walmart in Franklin Square, and there was a tent site behind the Walmart, and Joe was going to lead us back there. And I remember being in the car with her, and again, I'm like, okay, as a woman and as normally in society, you view drug addicts and homeless as potential threats. That's just how it is. And so sitting there, and I saw him come forward, I mean, clearly covered in sores, clearly a drug addict, and I'm thinking, I have children, where is he going to lead us? What's going to happen to us? I may not see my family again. I mean, all these things run through your mind, and, luckily everything turned out good, but but
there's that doubt, right?
There's that doubt.
That hesitation. Sure.
And so fast forward to we ministered to a whole group of people that day, but then Joe ended up cycling back in. We didn't know it, but we lost contact with him for 3 or 4 months. Yeah, it was about 3 or 4 months, and we always was like a wonder where Joe is, because when we would go out, they have their cliques and their groups, and they travel around, but we never ran into, and sometimes you'll run into people you haven't seen, and we wonder wonder where Joe is. I wonder if he's okay. You always, because you meet people, and
sure.
And one day she messaged me, and she sent me a screenshot of his mugshot, and she's like, "Guess who's in jail?" And I was like, "Joe's in jail." And I knew, and I think I actually texted her and said, "Well, we got him." And meaning, what I mean by that is when they do go into the jail, and at this time it was during COVID, so there's no visitation that's going on. No ministers are coming in and preaching in the jail. Everything is shut down, and so your only visitation is through virtual visitation, the computer. Well, one good thing is when they go into jail, most of the time they're detoxed and they're clean. They're in their right mind, and you can speak to them, clean, and you can carry on conversations, and sometimes they're desperate and they realize I've screwed up. But it was in that encounter when he went into jail, we were able to make a connection with him, get him connected to another when he came out. And he's had some slip ups over the prior years that's been kind of hard for us to deal with, but for the most part, I mean, he's working, and he's paid some of his fines off, and
he's got over a year clean.
And he's walking with the Lord now.
Do you ever connect anybody, say, with like Cornerstone?
He actually went to Cornerstone. That was his.
He was a journey.
Yes.
So when he went to jail, we connected him with one rehab.
Yeah.
That didn't work out, and then the Lord led us to have him come stay at the house. And we did that for a little bit, but he was still struggling. And then that last time, we prayed, and then the Lord's like, he needs to go to a more structured, faith-based program. So that's where we found Cornerstone, and we got him into Cornerstone. And he actually graduated there.
Yeah, because we have a connection with Cornerstone through our commercial division, and we have several commercial team members that have come through. Of course, the program's called something different now. Cornerstone's part of it, but there's a bigger name. We had him on the podcast, probably 20, 25 episodes ago.
Yeah.
So I was just curious when you said we connected him, but you didn't finish your statement.
Yeah.
So those my experience with community involvement, I find it rewarding when you do see that. Yeah. At least to this point, right? The success story, and you can see that tangible impact that you have that you've made.
Yeah. I think whenever you see a changed life like that, to me, that defines success. Like just one changed life, and you can see them, and it's rewarding.
Going back to 2020, March 2020, when COVID started, that's kind of a word I try to stay away from these days. But did you see, like so many organizations I've spoken to, did you see that need increase, the homelessness population increase some? What did you see through that period of time, from then until now? Has your interactions just increased, or just in general?
Well, one thing I noticed when COVID broke out is that a lot of times people who are experiencing homelessness, they can go into restaurants, use their Wi-Fi, go into the bathroom, they can freshen up some, they can get out of the weather elements for a little bit. And when COVID broke out, all the restaurants were closed. Everything was closed.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And they could not go inside anywhere. They were, everything was shut down, so they couldn't have access to things that they had access before. So
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so that was one thing that I noticed, was that. Was there anything that you noticed?
Is that we kept hearing the same thing. Yeah. So, hygiene was an issue, and just people and even more of an isolation issue.
Yes.
Just not wanting to be around and just isolating them even more, which...
Well, everybody was isolated, but I can imagine they're already isolated some, so it would just take it to another extreme level, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of something, again, you've shared so many things already that maybe you're most proud of accomplishing with the calling so far?
Well, I think we had talked about this before. Joe is huge. And in light of this, it's funny that we're doing this, because this past week we've heard of seven deaths of overdose. That kind of stuff hits you really hard.
Another thing I can think of is we had an event in September, and we had never done anything like that before. I'm used to going to events in speaking, but never being the one to actually organize an event.
Was this the event downtown or at the
Yes,
pavilion that
it
I
was
saw
at-
on the website?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I would say that that's an accomplishment for us.
Yeah.
Because
that was learning and outside of our comfort zone. And
Like me
Very
doing this
much.
every week, yeah.
yes, just,
And-
expanding your skill sets.
And
Sure.
all the decisions that went
Right.
into that, especially because it was supposed to rain that day, and it was like 100% rain, and then the Lord's like telling us to still
put it
do
on.
the event, and then you have all kind of people coming at you telling you that you should not do it, but then you're like, well, you know, and then having to battle that. But the thing that come out of that, there was actually two different things. When we talk about our mission, go after the one, whenever we got there was a lady sleeping in the middle of the
very
pavilion,
middle of the pavilion.
shivering because, it's cold, it's
cold.
raining. And when we got there, that's when we realized that she was the one. She was the one, and that's the reason why God told us to keep the event on. And so we got her a jacket, we, hooked her up, we had food. And then also out of that, there was another guy that actually I had met at the bus station just a few days prior whenever I was just going out and talking to people. And I invited him to this event. Well, he showed up, and he didn't even wait until the event was over. He wanted to get help right then. Right. And we had somebody take him to detox, and he ended up going to Rebound. And he actually just reached out to me the other day and was thanking us for how we helped him. So I think that falls into the line of
Sure it does, yeah.
accomplishments as well.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of ministry that day. One gentleman had just gotten out of prison the day before and showed up and got a tent and a sleeping bag. So it's different types of people, not only people in addiction, homeless, but that's one thing is the cycle. When they come out of prison, they have a hard time finding somewhere to live, and they can't get a job. And so it was very good. It was good.
So looking ahead, I mean, what do you see the future of the organization looking like? Next year or 10 years from now, just, in general, do you have any big plans or?
We do have a vision.
Okay.
So while we do have, my house that we use, obviously, I live there, so there's a lot of things that go into factor with that. So what we want for the ministry is to have not just one, but more than one home, like one specifically for women and children, and then another one specifically for men. And we've even talked about tiny houses. We don't know all the details or how things could play out, but what we see is that people often go through different phases of recovery. So while you need somewhere where people can have a place to recover, where they're not required to pay rent, they're not required to have a lot of responsibility, but where they can just fully focus on healing and recovering, you also need a place where they can transition. So, for instance, with me working at Phoenix Counseling, I work at Galen's House of Hope. It's a recovery house where we hold about 8 women. So what I see is it's a year-long program, and they're not required to pay anything. But what happens is I'm finding that a lot of them still need a place to transition to where they can have like affordable housing. Maybe not be completely on their own, but just have that extra support
Just
whenever
a step up between.
Yeah, like a step up. And so that's kind of like what we want to do with the calling, is to provide different phases of recovery for people to help them, so that way they actually recover instead of going back and reverting.
Sure. So, April, anything you would add to that, or did she cover?
Yeah, because everyone, what we've had, even from the very beginning, is that everyone is individualized. Our decisions that we make for them, and that's really for everybody, because everybody has different circumstances they come from, different trauma they've experienced, and so expecting someone to fit this mold of, okay, you're here for 12 months and then boom, you're out on your own, you're setting them up for failure if you don't have plans in place and things like that. We want them to succeed, and even if we do give them that first 12 months, you want them to continue to succeed. Even with Joe. Joe is still in his walk of recovery. And so you need that support, and you need to have things in place in our community. We can't, from what I've seen, is the homeless rate is going up.
Sure.
And whatever the statistics I sent you the other day, it's went up. I think it more than doubled or tripled over the last year, and it's probably going to go up even more. And so we need, as a community, to have things set in place to help people. And so that's how individualized to help them.
Okay, so before we move on, is there any questions I haven't asked? I mean, obviously,
I think we covered a lot.
Well, yeah, the main point is to bring awareness to the organization. So obviously, before we finish, we'll make sure our listeners know how to get and find more information, whether it's online or get in touch with you guys. But unless there's something I have forgotten, this is a podcast about Gaston County, and both of you guys being Gaston County residents, we do have what we call a speed round of questions that are unrelated to the calling.
Yes.
But we talk about some heavy topics sometimes on here, so we like to lighten it up a little bit. And so we're going to go through these questions, then we'll swing back around and make sure all our listeners know how to get in touch with you guys if they like. So, April, I'm going to start with you on this one, and again, these are questions that you have to answer no matter what.
Okay.
All right. So, what's your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
God, I don't really have one. Is that bad? Am I un-Gastonia? I don't.
Give us something.
I mean, I would say chocolate
Crickets.
if I had.
Crickets. Okay, chocolate.
Yeah, if I had to pick.
Well, you have to, because that's one of our questions.
I would have to pick chocolate then.
Well, that's an acceptable answer. That would be my answer.
Yeah.
Chasty?
Vanilla, plain Jane.
All right, so chocolate and vanilla. I don't think we've had that combination with our guests, and that is definitely the most two plain answers that we've had. Chasty, Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Sundrop.
April? Sundrop as well? All right.
Yeah.
Favorite local restaurant?
La Fuente.
Okay.
Mexican restaurant.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've been there, but yeah.
Oh, yes.
Hands down, Peter Will.
Peter Will is maybe the most popular answer.
Yeah.
And it's so close to here, it's a problem.
And that's probably where I'm going right after here.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Chassie, favorite outdoor activity to do here in Gaston County, or favorite park or something?
I would say I don't really go to parks a lot unless I'm going there to minister to people.
Fair enough.
But the one that I'm most familiar with, and the one is Martha Rivers.
Yeah, Martha Rivers is great.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I got kids and dogs, so it's Martha Rivers.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is my question that I ask every episode, and I'm going to start with you, April. And you might not be a college sports fan, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to ask anyway. UNC, Duke, or NC State? Yeah, you know idea what I'm talking about?
I do, but I'm not a huge fan. How can I be a boy mom and I'm not into
Exactly.
I don't know.
Well, the correct answer is?
What is it? NC State. Well, see, I went to ECU, so that's rival.
Oh, that's foreign language.
This completely changes.
This whole thing is over.
Everything that I thought I knew about April now is
I'm
I went to NC State.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We can edit. Chassie, it's all about you now. We're going to edit everything out that April has said to this point.
I'm not sure if I have anything better.
Okay, well,
we'll see.
We're going to ask the same question anyway. UNC, Duke, or NC State?
Well, I'm not really a sports fan, but I've always said UNC because they got Carolina blue. That's my favorite color.
This
one of them, anyways. I have many.
This episode is deteriorating very quickly.
I don't think it is.
ECU,
I think that's a matter of personal.
ECU and UNC in the same episode.
Yeah, here we go.
Well, we're going to move right along. Chastie, what is something very few people know about you?
I'm an introvert. Most people think that I'm very outgoing because, I speak and I'm, energetic. But at heart, I am an introvert. I really just like being at home, drinking coffee, and petting my dogs.
I hear you there, because that's kind of my thing, too. And that's why doing stuff like this just wears me out.
Yes, it drains me.
Yeah.
So, whenever I go to speak or whenever I go to events, I'm like, I get my energy from solitude.
Okay, very good. April, how about you?
I'm the opposite. I'm introverted, but I prefer to be around people, I guess,
Okay.
because I'm so isolated with kids. But, like, I'm starved to be around adults.
Yeah, after your ECU answer, that makes perfect sense. No, I'm kidding. April, how about a book or a blog or article or something you follow or something that might be worthwhile for our listeners to share? Besides the Bible?
Yeah,
we don't allow that answer because that's too obvious.
That is where I stay a lot, and then recently with school, so it's either kids' school books or the Bible or now my grad book. So
another question you're pretty much unwilling to answer. All right, Chasty, how about you? I'm going to assume we have at least one book recommendation, right?
Well, I have a podcast recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called Practicing the Way. There are different people on there, but the main guy who is on there is John Mark Comer, and he is awesome. And there's a wealth of resources.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a wealth of resources. There's so many different podcasts and podcast series on there. I haven't even got through them all. So,
what about your book? You're not going to share about your book for us?
Yes, my book is Septic: Being Cleansed from the Inside Out.
Okay.
It is available on Amazon and like Google Play and Barnes and Noble and also through my website. So that book is basically it chronicles my journey through addiction, recovery, and faith.
All right. Well, very good. I appreciate you sharing that. And is she the first author we've had on the podcast that actually has written their own book? That's interesting. So maybe we'll have, you never know who that might impact and help, right? Here's that for the first time. So I appreciate you kind of indulging us on this Gaston County related questions. So, we'll finish up here just a few more questions. And maybe stay with you, Chasty. Besides the calling, why would you say Gaston County is such a great place?
Well, while I feel like there are resources that we could definitely add to Gaston County, I do feel like we have a lot of resources already. Okay. Mainly like the Baptist Association, the Greater Gaston Baptist Association. They make Gaston County a better place.
Okay.
So I would definitely say them because they're like our go-to and they help so many people in so many different ways. So I would definitely say that.
You mentioned your pastor earlier. What church is that or what?
The King's House.
Okay.
Yeah. Joseph and Lynette Dutton.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. April, how would you answer that question about Gaston County?
Me and Chasty talked about this. I think with Gaston County, it's a wide range of what's the word I'm looking for?
Diverse.
It's a very diverse community.
Yeah.
So whoever wanted, if they felt led to get involved, there's a lot of different opportunities. We have homeless, we have different multicultural and diverse organizations already in the county. So if you're a person that wants to serve your community, there's many opportunities. It's a very diverse.
Yeah, you could not, if you're wanting to serve any type of group, cause, you could not use that as an excuse that you couldn't find it probably. Right. Some organization in Gaston County that is working with some group.
But it still has that small town feel.
Yeah.
It's different than Charlotte.
All right. Well, again, thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to ask April this question first because I'm not sure it will apply to Chasty, but we'll see. Knowing what you know now, April, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
And I would tell her that you cannot find your worth in anyone else other than Jesus. You can't find your identity in a relationship or a degree or a job or career or anything else, but your identity and your destiny and purpose is found in Jesus.
That's like the second mic drop from April here.
That's what I would tell. If I could go back and tell her that. Yeah.
It's so easy to get that perspective now, isn't it?
But I'm not sure she would hear it. We could say things.
Well, she would. She'd probably hear it, but maybe not be listening to actually what is.
There is a difference in hearing and listening.
Yeah, I have mine my kids are 23, 21, and 17 actually as of today. Today is January 18th. So when we're recording this, it's not going to be released for a couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah. I'm going to assume this has only been a couple of years ago, if that.
Actually, today's my birthday, and I'm 31.
Today is your birthday?
Yes.
So you're my daughter, my youngest, and you have the same birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So, how would you answer that? What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I'm not sure if I would give advice, but what I would do is give myself a word of encouragement.
Okay.
Because like April said, I'm not sure that any advice that my 20-year-old self probably just would have went in one ear and right out the other.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I would tell my 20-year-old self to hold on. You're about to go through a spiritual awakening. You're about to experience a lot of confusion. You're about to experience a lot of hell. But I promise you get out on the other end, and it's going to be okay.
Well, that's good, because you never know. Yeah, you never know what you're getting into or coming out of. Or one of my favorite authors and guys that I like to follow, a guy named Andy Andrews, and one of his things is we're either coming out of a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, or about to go into another crisis. So there's always something
that wraps it up.
There's always something going on. So. Guys, this has really been good. And so, again, remember the main point here is we want to bring awareness to your organization. Maybe there's somebody listening that might be moved, to help or do something. So how can our listeners find out more information, potentially get in touch with you guys, just anything and everything you'd like to share?
Well, the easiest way would just be go to our website. Okay. It's thecalling.org, but there's a hyphen in between the and calling.
Okay.
And we have contact information on there as well. Our email is thecalling61@gmail.com, and that's the best way to contact us.
And we're on Facebook.
Yes, we are on Facebook as well.
All right. So listeners out there, if anybody's taking any time to listen to this episode, if you're not moved by some of the stories and some of the things that you've heard, I want to check your pulse because we really heard some good stuff to say. So any last word before we close this episode out? Any last words of wisdom or anything else you'd like to share before we finish this one?
I have a question. What are you grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? Oh, gosh. I would say I am grateful for what immediately came to mind today. We happen to have, once a month, we have a whole company meeting. We do it at the ballpark because we can no longer fit in our little training room here any longer. And I got to stand up in front of that group and talk, on and off during the meeting. And I'm grateful for those 250 individuals that I get to spend time with and hopefully have an impact on. Hopefully it's good most of the time, impact. So that's what immediately came to mind when you asked that question. And because very rarely we've gotten large enough, our company, that we're rarely together anymore,
right.
all 250 of us. And so I actually enjoy that very much. So, but I'm the person asking the question, Chasty. I'm not supposed to have to answer any questions. Correct, Naomi? Jeez.
I like to break rules and traditions.
Okay, I'll have to remember that, except for the UNC, Duke, and NC State question. So, but seriously, anything else you'd like to share before we finish this episode?
No, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you guys doing this and putting forth the effort because it really is. It's very helpful. It's a good resource.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate that. Listen, we something I always like to say in most episodes is I appreciate what you guys are doing, because the difference between what it feels like you guys are doing in some organizations is just the feet on the ground, the boots on the ground, so to speak, and that one-on-one, face-to-face contact, which is where the difference and impact is really made. It's those one-on-one interactions is what.
We couldn't do what we do without our partners and our supporters. So
Fair
everybody
enough.
has their part.
Absolutely.
Everybody
Absolutely.
has their part because it does. It takes,
Yep, everybody has a role to play.
Yes.
So something that I do at each episode is share my own book recommendation. And when after reading some information about the organization, I went back to a book I read 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a recommendation by my daughter, who is just started her last semester at Appalachian State. She's She's been involved with different community organizations, but it's a book called Under the Overpass by a guy named Mike Yankoski. I hope I pronounced that right, but Under the Overpass. And him and a buddy spent 5 months traveling through 5 different metropolitan cities, living with the homeless population.
Yeah.
And if you've read that book
I haven't
or heard
read the book, but I've read about
it was a very impactful book for me, and it really gave you some detailed just detailed information, and somebody like me who's frankly I've lived a charmed life, right?
Yes.
And very so fortunate, but it gives you a good insight of what that community has to deal with.
Right.
Right. And so I would strongly recommend it, and especially if you want to learn more about what in the same things happening here. I said metropolitan area, that's because that is what they did. But listen, you drive around Gaston County or Gastonia, just if you really just pay attention, especially where we're located here in downtown Gastonia, if you pay attention at all, you can't miss that. And my quote or thought for the week kind of goes with what Chasty just shared, that the encouragement she would give her 20-year-old self. Comes from a guy named Richard Paul Evans, and he said, "It is often in the darkest skies that we see the brightest stars." So, unfortunately, you can't have the light meaning anything without that darkness sometimes. And so that just struck me for some reason when I was preparing for today's episode. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate your willingness to share. And, we will cross our fingers, and hopefully your organization will maybe, again, like I said, somebody might hear this for the first time and learn about you, and something positive can come from it. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please spread the word if you can, or continue to spread the word if you can, about the podcast. And please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And please follow us on all our social media platforms. And as Naomi always says, a good 5-star rating will help us get noticed. Thanks again to Chasty and April for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Naomi Hunt and Amy Anderson from GSM Services, and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.